So, little housekeeping. First, I'll introduce myself. I'm Dayna Wilson. I'm a seniors real estate specialist with Keller Williams Realty. I work with boomers, zoomers, and savvy seniors on the move. And I'm the host and the founder of this series. How many newbies, how many first-timers do we have today? Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So, you groupies, I'm going to have you turn to them and say, welcome. Welcome. I love it that after 5.5 years, we still have new folks showing up and coming to these series. So somebody mentioned to me as they were coming in, Dayna, I was on your website and I don't see anything scheduled for 2023. What's going on? So, not to fear, we are going to have a full schedule for 2023 every month, first Wednesday of the month, same time, same channel, right here, always 10 to 11:30. So put that on your calendar. We do ask for RSVPs because there is a maximum to this room, and we have gotten close a couple times to maxing out in the room. So we just want to keep track of that. What else? A couple of people need to leave early. Go ahead and leave early. You won't disturb us. We're all friends here. What else was I going to say? Oh, so this is exciting. Next month, I'm shaking it up a little bit. The topic was simplifying your holidays. But I really was struggling with what was that going to look like and how would I provide benefit and value to you. I decided to do something completely different, which has nothing to do with our usual topics. And it's going to be a version of Antiques Roadshow. And it's going to be called What's It Worth? So we're going to do things a little differently. We're going to have a couple wonderful, maybe 2 or 3 local, very well-respected appraisers. And we obviously, if you all had brought an item today, we obviously couldn't get to them all. But what I'm going to ask is, we're going to have this posted on the website, hopefully by the end of the week. If you want to bring an item, we're going to ask you to send in a picture and a short description of it so that our appraisers have a chance to kind of look at it and determine if it would be something that would be appropriate or applicable to share with the group. So if you are chosen, then you'll bring your item and then we'll have a table there and then we'll talk about it and they'll talk about it with you, and I think it's going to be really, really fun. So we might have a couple other treats in store for you as well next month. But anyway, watch for that. I think it's going to be a good time. So let's get into today's topic, which is always on everyone's minds, and it's sort of the fear and challenge about, we're living longer these days, and how do we not outlive our money? How do we ensure that our nest egg that we worked so hard to have and save for is going to be there for us as we continue to live and age? And then how do we continue, or what type of lifestyle can we have based on what we've done, and then what things can we be doing now looking forward? And we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the market, and we've got a wonderful panel here today. So I'm very excited. We're going to have Richard, Nancy, Mary, and Mark introduce themselves. And remember that we will send an email out after this, by the end of the week, thanking you for coming, and you'll have all of their contact information. So don't fret if you didn't get who was with who and whatever, because we're going to get you all that information too. I'll also ask that we save questions for the end, and we will go around and get as many questions as possible. You should all have an evaluation on your seat. We do take those very seriously, so if you have any comments, if you want a consultation, if you have a question that didn't get answered that you want an answer to, we're here to help. So we ask that you fill those out, and we'll collect those at the end, and then we'll have our little raffle prize. Okay, let's get going. I am going to start with Mary at the end there and ask her to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about who she is and what she does. The green, is it green?
Usually my voice is loud enough. I'm Mary Ballin. I am a wealth advisor under Paragon Wealth Management. I hold a certified financial planner designation and a certified divorce financial analyst designation. I do traditional wealth advisory work, a lot of financial planning, because I do believe in financial planning. But I also have a niche practice where I help women going through transition. It's not that I don't love you men, because I got two of them myself, a husband and a son. I just have seen a lot of women who haven't participated in the financial aspect of their life, and they become very lost and very vulnerable when they go through a divorce or lose their spouse. My practice is in Walnut Creek, and I've been doing this, God forbid, over 20 years.
How long was that? Okay.
Over 20 years.
Oh, well, we're glad to have you
That's
here.
me.
Thank you, Mary. Richard.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Richard Del Monte. I am a certified financial planner also. I have a master's degree in financial planning, and I'm a JD. And I own Del Monte Group, which is a fee-only wealth management firm in Alamo. I've been in the business for 37 years. What am I going to do? With no point in not denying it, right? We're a small wealth management boutique, and we do financial planning. And I guess what the claim to fame is we like to solve problems for people. Bring us your problems. We love to work on those things. And we also do helping families pass on wealth successfully to the next generation of the family.
That's awesome. And before I have Nancy introduce herself, I'm excited to report that the Del Monte Group is going to be one of our sponsors and education partners for 2023. So they're going to be new to the education partnership. And I do need to do a shout out before we get going to our 2022 education partners, because it's thanks to these wonderful people for their time, for their support, their partnership, that we're able to continue these year after year after year for free for you at no charge, because there is quite a substantial charge to all the things that go into producing this every month. So a shout out to Better Days in Home Care. They do 8-hour shifts, or they'll do live-in care. We've got Carlton Senior Living. Anyone here from Carlton? If you are, jump up, wave. We've got Mutual of Omaha Lending. Marty is in the house. They do the reverse mortgage for purchase. We've Got Atria Senior Living. Who's here from Atria? We've got two. Wave and smile. Stand up, Holly. Come on. We're awesome. We appreciate you guys. Reutlinger Community. I do not see Nahid in the house. We did a bus tour for Reutlinger this year out in Danville. They are a continuum of care. We have got Oakmont. I know we've got Oakmont in the house because I've seen them both, Pamela and Michaela. That is Concord and Montecito. Custom Moving and Hauling, Andriana, thank you. They do, obviously, what their name implies, right? Moving and hauling. And move management, a little bit. Creating New Hope, Christine, there you go. Transition coordinator. Am I getting that right? Senior Living Advisor. I like that better. Who am I missing here? Silverman Law Group, Rob Silverman, Estate Planning. And Dayna Wilson, Real Estate, Luxury. Awesome. Okay, so let's get rocking and rolling. Back to our wonderful panel. Nancy, tell us who you are.
Good morning, everybody. My name is I forgot to hit the button. Now you can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Nancy Hairsine. I'm also a certified financial planner and investment advisor representative. The name of my company is Lifetime Planning, Investments, and Financial Services. I've been in the business for over 20 years. My office is located in Pittsburgh. Just to give you a little background, I did grow up in the Midwest on a small farm, raised livestock and crops, and so I learned at a very young age the importance of working hard. But my dad also really instilled in me the importance of preserving your assets and your earnings from year to year, because as we know right now, going through the volatile market, things can change. And I use those life lessons in working with my clients today. So the array of services that I offer is really financial planning. I think that is the basis of what you need to know where you are and where you're going and what you want to accomplish. And along the way, there's other types of, retirement planning, insurance planning, it could be charitable giving, educational planning, whatever those goals seem to present. But at the end of the day, it's just really important to provide a plan that addresses, your goals and your objectives.
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. And we've got our resident CPA today, but he's more than a CPA. I think of you always as more of a CPA. So introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Well, the first thing is, Dayna said no acronyms, so CPA means Certified Public Accountant.
Thank you.
And I also have an MBA, which is a Master's of Business Administration. I'm the second generation owner of a firm called Mark Halverson CPA, so it's pretty easy to remember. We're currently located in Pleasant Hill on Gregory Lane. Been there over 10 years. I've been practicing since 1994. We do taxes. We do both personal, business, and estate and trust taxation filings. We also do bookkeeping and payroll support for some small businesses, primarily dental offices. And that's the same focus that my dad did when he was the founder. Let's see. I guess the one thing I left off on the list is we do a lot of planning. It kind of comes naturally when you're doing people's tax returns every year that as you get to know them and they have questions, you have to figure out what the answers are. So being a second generation owner, we have a lot of clients that have gone through the retirement years and the estate, passing on their estates to their children. So we've seen a lot of that, and feel like I've had a lot of experience working with seniors and their children. I highly encourage people to get their children involved before it's necessary. I think it just helps when the time comes that they already know what's going on. Secrecy never really helps the situation when people have to come in and pick up where you left off. We also are very accustomed to helping someone when their spouse passes away. Oftentimes, the person that survives is not the one that's been doing the finance or the accounting, and so they need a lot of hand-holding. And so that's kind of us in a nutshell. I do work with my brother, who's a CPA, and then I have a couple of family members that round out our support staff, and all of them have been with me for probably at least 15 years. So everybody kind of knows what they're doing at this point, although I must say I learn new things every day, which for those do-it-yourselfers, there's a lot of things that you don't know.
Yeah, amen. Amen.
So I feel like it's my obligation when planning to help people know what their options are. It's not my position to make the decisions, but to let them know what they can choose from and what the ramifications are as far as taxes and other, I spill over a little bit into the finance area, but I won't be addressing that as much today.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Well, Nancy, I've got a question for you, and it's sort of the crux of this whole topic today, which is how do we ensure that we don't outlive our money? I mean, I bet all of us sort of have an idea, or we had a dream or a vision of what our post-retirement lives would look like, and many of us are either getting close to it or in it or well past it. So maybe touch on that question for me.
Yeah, it's important to make sure that it's less likely to run out of money. And what do you need to do to make that happen? It all begins really with goal setting and the initial planning. It usually begins, this process will generally begin, prior to your retirement, but it also takes you through retirement. And it's important to know what your retirement is going to look like. It's also important to have conversations with one another, what you think your retirement is going to look like together. It's always surprising how differences of opinions come up about how they want to see their retirements, and sometimes it's a little bit too late to make those adjustments. So it's important, it should be an ongoing conversation that you have. But it's also extremely important in this planning process that you are honest with your advisor. Oftentimes, as an advisor, and I'm sure all of us here have experienced it, that there's a little tidbit of information that doesn't get shared. It can be credit card debt, it could be an investment that you have someplace else, it could be maybe you're living on more than what this new lifestyle number is meant to be. But you don't need those surprises of, oh, by the way, I have $40,000, $60,000, $100,000 of credit card debt that I just didn't mention because I thought I could handle it. Well, generally in retirement, you can't handle it. So I can't stress enough to be really upfront with your advisor and let them know what you have and what your goals are. It's also important, when you do need income, when you are in the income receiving stage, that you also are preserving your assets, but your assets also have to work for you to make sure that you can keep up with what we're experiencing today, inflation. So you need to know that your plan will work in those situations as well. Another critical component is budgeting. You need to have a budget. This is probably, in my experience, has been one of the most difficult pieces of the puzzle for clients in retirement to live on a budget. Oftentimes when we're working, you're saving your money for retirement, but you're also spending what you have, and you know that next month you're going to have a paycheck, et cetera. So if you have to take out more money than you need, it's not like at the end of the month in working years I experience with clients like, oh, we have X amount of dollars left over, let's go out and see what we can spend. When you're on a budget, you're on a budget, and those monies have to be set aside because it is part of the retirement plan. When we run retirement analysis, we're projecting this is your income, this is your expenses. So you have to keep within those goals, or we have to be able to change them along the way to see how they work. Your plan needs to be flexible. As we all know, life happens, things happen that we don't expect. So a plan needs to be able to move with you. And really depending, at the end of the day, it's all about your goals and objectives and putting a plan into place that fits those goals.
Nice. That's a very comprehensive answer. And Mary would like to add to that.
Yeah, and I'm sure this is something that Richard and Nancy do, but as a professional advisor, we understand how much you can take out of your portfolios if you have an investment portfolio a year, and it's a sustainable amount. And if you get in the habit of taking out more than what is sustainable, that's where your success really starts to go down. And so again, back to Nancy's point, you have to be honest with us what's going on, because we want to make sure that you're going to end life with at least a penny in your pocket, okay? Hopefully a little bit more than that.
Oh.
But also as an advisor, we want you to spend as much money as you want to spend, but we want you to do it responsibly. So just know that, we can help you figure out how much you can take out without eroding your future.
Nice. Richard.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, just one thing. For those of you that are DIYers that don't have an advisor, you remember the movie with City Slickers and had Jack Palance in it? He was that curly, and he said there was the one thing, so the one thing that you should remember is that is the number 20. So you take all of your assets that you have that you are living on and divide it by 20, and that whatever that number is, you shouldn't be taking out more than that out of your portfolio basically every year. That's a good rule of thumb. It's not universal, but it's a good way to look at it.
Huh. Interesting. Thank you. Divide our total assets by 20, Richard. Richard, divide our total assets by 20, and we should not be taking out more
Right.
than that.
It equals 5% of your portfolio, basically.
But I would argue right now,
Uh-oh,
maybe less.
maybe less. Okay. These guys are smart, so whatever they're saying, I would be taking notes. Mark, you talked about really doing an assessment, right? Doing an assessment, reviewing the budget. This plays right off of our last kind of comments. Understanding what's coming in and what's going out. Tell us more about what we need to do.
Well, I think it was introduced very well that I'm a big fan of budgets, but I'm not a big fan of the word budget. Budget is a word that tends to put people off or to maybe even lose the audience. I like to use the word awareness in my practice. I prepare awareness spreadsheets that I can then review people's position. You really can't do a budget if you don't know what you have or what your sources of income are. So as I think about it, I don't know that we typically think about it in this manner, but we have fixed income and we have variable income. And if you break it down further, most of our income is fixed. It does change though, but it's more or less fixed. If you think about most people will qualify for Social Security. That's basically fixed once you start. It goes up every year, but it's you can't take it early. You can't dip in and take next year's. You have to wait for it each month. There's other things like that. Some people have pensions. Some people are taking RMDs, which are dictated to us from the government.
RMDs?
What is that?
What is that, Mark?
Well, that stands, a lot of people don't know what it stands for. It's required minimum distributions. And when you reach the age of 72, the government decides that it's time for you to start taking out all that money you've saved in your retirement accounts. And it applies to primarily IRAs, but also other instruments. And what I see in my practice is that people tend to do the minimum. They don't think about it. They just say, if I have to, I have to. Where in my practice, I encourage people to look at how does that minimum affect their tax return. I have clients every year that don't pay tax, and they could be taking more out tax-free. So that's a mistake or an opportunity missed if they don't take out at least enough to meet their standard deduction on their tax return or their itemized deductions. The other types of instruments that a lot of us have are, we might have some investments in bonds. Bonds are basically a fixed income stream. If we have stocks and they pay dividends, that's a fixed income stream for the most part that tends to be the same every year. What we don't consider fixed is capital gains. If the markets are going up and down and we sell, we might have a capital gain or a capital loss, and those can be managed. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen in that realm is that people have sold a big gain position, and then the year later they sell a big loss position. If they had done it in the reverse order, they could have offset each other. But because they did the loss later, they are stuck with the $3,000 maximum deduction every year. And so we want to look at opportunities. We want to make sure that if we're doing some big moves that those are covered.
What other costly mistakes should we be considering so we might be able to avoid them?
Well, there's a lot of them, and I can't cover all of them in this setting, but we usually look at things as opportunities and things to avoid. And I think the others on the panel are probably better at describing this, but one of the biggest things I've seen that my clients have made the mistake of is putting all of their eggs in one basket. People that work for a big company, they buy their stock, they have their retirement with them, and when those companies have gone out of business, they're basically going to start from scratch. The other scenario is where people maybe invest in one thing even though it's not the company they work for. And there was I had a couple of clients actually that was heavy into this one local company. It was a real estate lending company, and lost a lot of money. So diversification is definitely a risky proposition. If you don't follow the rules of diversifying into different things. And just one more thought on that. When people come to me, I start to get to know them, and I see the same things every year in their tax returns. And it's quite common to see somebody pick one strategy, and that's the only thing they'll do. They're either heavy into real estate, they're heavy into certificates of deposit, maybe they have everything in municipals. These all have great attributes, but it's not really diversification if you have everything in one type of investment strategy. So I'll let others chime in on that, but
And we're going to get more into diversification in a little bit, but thank you. I'm taking notes too, by the way. All right, this is sort of asking the whole panel question. How do each of you, we can start with Mary, how do each of you respond to your clients when they're calling and asking about the current market decline or craziness? And we'll just sort of go down to Nancy, because it's a real thing and it's a worry. I do. Mary's looking at me like, I don't want to answer this question. It's too
What?
scary.
Clients call you and it's turbulent like this? I don't know what you're talking about. I have to say I don't get too many calls, and I think that's because I've been talking about this year since probably 2016, 2017 with my clients. I'm a big proponent of having cash on the sidelines. And I realize right now that some people will say, well, inflation and cash is not making any money, but you know what? Cash is golden right now. And so, I'm a big proponent of making sure you have a certain amount of cash on the sideline. I'm not here to dictate how much cash that is, because different people have different thresholds of what they're comfortable with. I have one client that tells me, I just want enough cash to be able to buy a new truck whenever I want to and pay cash for it. I have another client that says, if I don't have $1 million in the bank in cash, I can't sleep at night. I kid you not.
Wow.
So those are two very big extremes, but it's somewhere in the middle there. Because when times get rough like they are right now, you can depend on that cash to help you ride through this downturn in the market and be prepared so that you can still do the things that you want to do, pay those fixed expenses, and even do some of the other things that you've planned for in your financial planning, like that vacation that you've been waiting for a couple of years now that we're coming out of COVID. And you don't have to touch your investment portfolio. You can wait until it comes back up again. It works because the markets go up more than they go down. That's what history has shown us. And we just have to remember that and ride it out.
Okay. Richard.
Okay, I may upset some people with this, what I'm going to tell you, but
Ruh-roh. You know that at these seminars we give you the truth and the facts, right?
sure,
We
you
don't
get to pick who you
sugarcoat.
like,
We
but-
don't sugarcoat. We've had some tough discussions here. So, what do you have to tell us?
So, I would encourage you to think about, when you think about living in California, we have climate and then we have the weather, right? So the climate is, everybody would agree, is wonderful, right, in California. In the weather, we do have some really rotten days where the weather is terrible. Yesterday it rained. It wasn't so great if you wanted to go out and play golf. But so I would encourage you to think about the stock market in terms of the climate, which is the long-term return on the stock market is 10 to 11%-ish, over 100 years. But the weather is like the current decline in the market. That's what's happening today. You wouldn't move out of California just because it rained yesterday, would you? So getting out of the market because it's down right now, it doesn't make sense. I think you should have the right mix of exposure to equities based on your risk tolerance and your goals. You shouldn't be have too much more than you can stand. But it's okay to have it and not worry about it. And I will tell you, the best analogy I can give you is when I started in 1985 in this business, the Dow Jones was at 1,500. And everybody was running around with their hair on fire saying, the market's too high, it's going to go down. And I'm like, and I just like, okay, whatever. Well, since then, the market has gone in my career from 1,500 to almost 33,000. And in the middle of all that time frame, there's been couple of 50% crashes, a one-day crash in 1987 of 22%, a bunch of 30% declines, and I can't even count how many 20% declines. And you would think that we would all be bankrupt right now if that's all we thought about. But in reality, if you add in dividends, the stock market is up 59-fold just in my working career. And if you look at small caps, it's up 74-fold. So, and I actually had an IRA worth $10,000 when I first started, and I never touched it, and now it's worth $600,000. So in all that period of time, I mean, I feel like the guy on Mad Magazine. What, me worry? You know, what am I supposed to be worried about when the markets have done all that in the midst of all those market declines? Why should I be sweating these temporary declines? I want someone to explain it to me, because I just look past it and consider it as the weather. It will pass, and we need to have our exposure in the equities markets and not sweat it. So
I love that analogy of the weather. Doesn't that make sense to you? That makes sense to me.
you know, but I just think that we miss out if we let our emotions. One more thing. The CNBCs and some of those the financial media that we all read, that stuff is investment pornography.
Ooh.
There is no redeeming value to that stuff. I watch CNBC when the markets are going down, and I feel like throwing up because I see the market going down, and I've been doing this for years. You know, there's no value in knowing how the Dow is doing today or this week or anything. It's just not valuable. It's not relevant. It's just white noise. So you want to look at the big picture. Don't get lost. You know, it's the forest and the trees thing.
That's lovely.
That's what I think.
And I'm thinking, if we had a group here today and we were in our 20s and 30s, that Mad Magazine comment would have gone way over everyone's head. No, but that's good, because I know what you're talking about, you know, right? Okay, Nancy, what do you talk about? What have you been talking about with your clients lately?
Oh, I too haven't heard from very many clients. I do periodically check in with clients just to see how they are doing, really just to remind them that not to listen to the noise, as Richard was saying, because that just creates unnecessary stress, especially when you know you are living within your retirement plan, and it is stressful. So just don't listen to the noise.
Interesting.
And also, you know, I remind them, we have been talking about this as well, as Mary was saying, for some time, just volatility in the market, it's always going to go up and down. We can be pretty much assured of that. And also that, just reminding that, you know, when you're investing in equities, it's a long-term commitment. But at the end of the day, I think it's just important to let your clients know that, you know, we have their back. We are watching out for them, and that they have to be reassured that, you know, if they do have these questions or concerns or feeling stressed or something's keeping them up at night, to call us, because it is our job to help you stay the course, because we know for the success of your plan, we need to stay the course.
I have a personal question for the financial advisors, and this is just out of curiosity. How often does your typical financial advisor actually look at a specific client's portfolio? Is it once a quarter, once a month, once a week? It depends on your
Depends.
client load. I don't know. I'm just curious.
I can say that I meet with, I have a team that supports me, and I meet with my investment management contact, who has other people behind her, but weekly, just to see if there's any outliers going on in the portfolios. I do a deep dive on a quarterly basis before quarterly reports go out.
Okay.
We have software, we use technology, it helps us, but we are able to monitor all the portfolios daily to see if there's any deviation from where we want them to be. So we let, if you're going to have a portfolio with 10% and 10 different things, we let each asset class have 20% run room. So if it goes down below 20%, below what it's supposed to be, we will true it back up. And if it goes above 20% of where it's supposed to be, we will trim it down. And so we do that every day and look at it, and we find outliers. It's not often that we find those, but they do. Like when in times of really severe volatility, we do get those for sure. And that's when you want to jump on it, make a difference. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Nancy, what about you?
Same for me. I generally do sort of keep just tabs on what's happening weekly, but definitely quarterly, taking into account. In meeting with my clients, it's really kind of their preference. For some, really only want to see me once a year. Others, might want to call me once a week, or I see them quarterly. It just depends what their needs are and what makes them feel comfortable with the plan.
Got it. Interesting. Sorry, I threw that one in on you. All right, Mary, what should we know about the balance of stocks and bonds in our portfolios? Like how do we know, and what is it based on, right? Mark, is this a question for you?
No, I want to do the previous question.
Oh, sorry.
So
thank you.
obviously, I don't get as many calls when the markets decline as my friends, but there are two opportunities when markets are declining that do fit within the accounting role.
All right.
The first is loss harvesting. So when markets are down, it's a great time to lock in some losses for future use, or to offset gains you had previously if it's still the same calendar year. The other thing that comes up is, and hopefully all of you have heard of this, but there's a thing called a Roth conversion. Roth is somebody's name, it's not an acronym.
He keeps looking at me. I told them don't use acronyms because we don't do what you do, and I said they couldn't do that.
So Senator Roth was the inventor of the Roth IRA, which is a tax-free retirement account. And a lot of people are converting their traditional IRAs, which are tax-deferred, and they pay the tax when they pull money out, and they're putting it into Roths. And you can do that by paying the tax and converting it into this new instrument, which will then grow tax-free forever, including when you pass it on to beneficiaries. So when the markets are down, that's a great time to convert before it recovers. You can save some taxes by selling or by converting when the markets are low, and seeing that recovery happen within the Roth when it's going to be tax-free. So
Can anyone do that, or is there a cap to your income?
Anybody can do a conversion, and there's no age limit either. So if someone's younger and has a traditional IRA, they can do the conversions. Usually it's done when people retire. They try to rebalance things and have some in each type of account. There's advantages to that as well as, when you need money, do I take it out of my Roth or do I take it out of my traditional? One has tax implications and the other does not.
And you don't have to do it all at once. Mark, you probably fill up tax brackets and stuff and do that sort of thing with your client.
Conversions are best done over a period of years usually. It depends on the size we're dealing with.
You don't need to do the whole thing?
No, you can pick any number and convert that
Did you
amount.
guys know that? See, this is good stuff. I'm taking notes. But thank you. I'm so sorry I didn't.
It's all right.
Didn't mean to ignore you over there.
Don't let it happen again.
I know, I won't. Dang. Richard, so now do you want to take that stocks and bonds question? I want both of you. I want to see what you guys have to say. Yeah. It was, what should we know about the balance of stocks and bonds in our portfolio?
Wait for it. It depends.
Oh man, that's an attorney answer.
Must be a lawyer. That's a good one.
I did not go to law school. No, seriously, it does. It depends on your circumstances. A lot of times people will come to me and they're like, well, I'm now 70, so I should have X amount of bonds in my portfolio. And that theory has changed through research over the decades. That's the way it was when my dad was investing back in the day. But I will tell you that it depends. It depends on, and that's why that financial planning that Nancy is mentioned is so important, is because it depends on how much growth you need. It depends on what you want your money to do. I'll never forget having a conversation with my dad when he was in his 90s, and we were talking about this, and he asked me that question. He's like, Mary Louise, I'm 90. I shouldn't have so much stock in my portfolio. I said, Daddy, You're making more money on your pension than you ever did when you were an electrician. And so the day my dad died, he was 85% stocks. Because that money was not for his life. It was going to be coming into my generation, for myself and my siblings and our children. And we were very fortunate that way. My dad, he didn't need the money. So it just depends. If you need the money, yes, we want to make sure that we control the volatility, the up and the downs in your portfolio. But if you're receiving enough fixed income, i.e. your Social Security, your pensions, your RMDs, required minimum distributions, I almost blew it there with the acronyms, then you might not need to touch any more of your investment portfolio, which means you could have more growth or more stocks in the portfolio so that you can, if you want to, leave it to the next generation or to charity, if you are charitably inclined.
Nice. Richard, anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add, just for DIYers out there, as a generalization, it's not for everybody, but people should have, in general, at least about 35 to 40% of their assets, investable assets in equities, I think, because you need an inflation hedge. We're going to talk about inflation here in a minute. Fixed income, CDs, T-bills, things like that, they don't keep up with inflation. So you need something that's going to beat inflation over time.
Nice. Did we cover the next question, which was kind of talking more about diversification, risk tolerance, and international and such? You want to take that and run with it for a minute, Richard?
Sure.
Okay. It's more about alternative investment options.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
We've been talking about the stocks and bonds and.
Sure. So you should have, in your stock portfolio, you should have large U.S. stocks, you should have small U.S. stocks, you should have international large and small, and you should have at least a little bit in emerging markets as well, because you never know which markets are going to do better. Believe it or not, they call it the lost decade, there was a period of time from 2000 to 2010 or 2010 where the S&P 500 actually lost money. And if you had all your money in that, you would have been basically decimated in your portfolio. However, if you had a significant exposure to overseas stocks, you would have been fine. Your portfolio would have survived just fine. So, yes, the S&P has been doing great recently in the last 10 years, but the odds of that continuing are, in my opinion, low. You got to cover the bases. You don't want to be chasing returns. So also you want to have other kinds of assets like TIPS, which are there's an acronym.
Yep.
Acronym alert. Treasury inflation protected securities. Those give you a return, a slight return, in interest, but then they give you an inflation hedge too. So the principal gets adjusted every 6 months based on inflation. Those are decent. I bonds. Everybody has heard about I bonds. The rates were 9.7 or whatever it was percent.
What?
Just got dropped.
They just dropped it. Yeah. I bonds, Series I bonds. They were U.S. savings bonds that paid 9.7%, I think, up till the Halloween. But now, if you buy them, it's like 6.5% for the next 6 months, and they're adjusted to inflation every 6 months. You can only buy $10,000 per person, so if a married couple can buy 20 per year. And you have to buy them from the federal government on their website, the treasurydirect.gov. That's the only place you can get them. So you can't buy them at the bank, or your advisor can't get them for you. Then also real estate. I think you should, if possible, if you have that, you should own rental real estate. That's a really great hedge for inflation, which again we'll talk about. And if you don't want to be managing the property yourself and dealing with tenants, you can have property managers that do that. Other states, there's a lot of growth. If you go to places like in Utah and Idaho and Texas and Arizona, you just see nothing but taillights coming out of California and going to those states, and those property values are going up and the rents are going up as well. So those are good assets. And commodities and gold can be a reasonable addition to a portfolio, but they should be the spice in the portfolio, not the meal, because they're, we hear people that put gold and silver bars under their beds. That's not good. I'll just say that. And crypto, no. I'm sorry if you've made your fortune in crypto, but in general, those are probably just going to end up at zero at some point.
Mark.
I just have to mention one thing that Richard knows but didn't mention, and that's that you need to invest in memories and in your families and in your retirement, meaning enjoy your retirement. One of the biggest mistakes I see when I'm meeting with people every year is that they're afraid to touch their retirement. They're afraid to go from adding to their retirement to using their retirement. So don't feel like you have to keep saving for your beneficiaries.
Oh.
Wow, thank you.
You got a clap. That's awesome.
I'm not even a finance guy.
Thank you for adding that. I'm going to be one of those people. When I stop working, I'm just going to get hives. I mean, that's terrifying to me, and I don't know why. So, but I have professionals I could call upon. Mary, what is the risk these days in looking into 2023? Like, what are your crystal balls telling you about risks moving forward? You don't use a crystal ball?
Oh my goodness, I wish somebody would find that crystal ball.
Anything to add, I guess, to what we were just talking about? I don't know.
I mean, inflation is a risk right now. I mean, everybody knows going to the grocery store is more expensive than it's been, and that's why hearing my whole having cash on the sidelines might have rubbed the wrong way for some people. And, we probably went up 0.75% when Powell spoke. I guess he's speaking a little bit later today. We're expecting a 0.75% increase again. And we're expecting December to have another increase in the federal funds rate. They say, they being the economists out there that make way more money than any of us combined here, that things will start settling down. They're trying to slow down the economy, which I know probably sounds really counterintuitive. So keeping your buying power goes back to what Richard said. Don't go all bonds. You've got to have this growth in there because bonds are not going to keep up with inflation. Okay. I think the biggest risk is not to plan and not to understand what you can spend. I'm sure there's more the others can add.
Nice. Anybody want to add anything to that?
Yeah, we do know that the feds are going to continue to raise interest rates until they think things are where they want to be. The inflation number I'm hearing is around 4%. Once they feel that that's under control, then they'll be tackling. Is that better?
Yeah, I can't hear you very well.
Once they know that that's under control, they'll probably start tackling some of the wage inflation as well. So we really don't know at the end of the day, looking forward to 2023, exactly how aggressive the feds are going to be. So back to, really this conversation is really, it's about planning and having your goals and objectives and staying the course.
Anything else to add about inflation in general?
Yeah, I have one thing.
Okay, Rick.
I think we all could agree that up until this last year, we would talk about inflation to clients, and they'd be like, eyes would glaze
Whatever.
over, like,
Yeah,
what? I
whatever.
don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Now we have everybody's attention. Now everybody's hair's on fire about it. But the long-term average going back for the last 100 years has been about 4% for inflation during the big times and the low times. The Fed is trying to engineer it so we go back to 2%, but I think it's reasonable to expect the long term, over the rest of our lifetimes, it's going to be averaging around 3.5% to 4%. And just to give you, that eats away, just to give you a number to hang your hat on, if you have a $10,000 pension coming in today with no COLA, in 10 years, the purchasing power.
Cola?
Sorry, cost of
Pepsi.
living allowance.
Oh.
Okay. You should have a buzzer, with no cost of living allowance built into it, like if you work for a government or something. That purchasing power of that $10,000 just 10 years from now is going to erode to $6,650. That's all it's going to buy. And meanwhile, the cost of living is going up. So just to be able to keep the same purchasing power on a $10,000 pension in 10 years, you'd have to have almost $15,000 at 4% inflation. So you ignore that at your own risk. I mean, that's the biggest thing that I would want you to come away with in terms of inflation. It's a big factor.
Sheesh. Well, on that happy note, I'm going to go right into, because this is something right up your alley, Richard, and I know it's one of your specialties, is counseling clients to help them prepare their heirs to inherit, their wealth. Where do we begin with that? How do you prepare the assets, and how and when do you, or we, talk with our heirs about this? Like, how do we even begin?
Sure. So the way we prepare our assets is usually with trust. We do good estate planning and we do all that and make sure that the assets are ready to transfer. I think there's a bigger concern about preparing the kids to receive the money, and I think that's something a lot of us tend to ignore or overlook. I hear people say to me, "My kids get along great. I'm not going to worry about that." And then you're laughing, right? And they might get along great as siblings, but as soon as they're thrust into the role of having to be co-managers or co-owners of a real estate portfolio or some other thing, all bets are off. I've had one family, there was 5 kids. And the wife, I said, we should have a family meeting with your kids. Oh, no, we get along great. And then, so the mother died on a Friday. On a Monday, they had a meeting. On Tuesday, she called me up and she said, I've resigned as the trustee of our trust. We're all getting lawyers, and we're completely spread apart. We're apart on everything. It was completely unforeseen to her. But what happens is there's an old axiom called, and it's a proverb called shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. You may have heard of it. Anybody heard of it before? No. Okay. So shirt sleeve speaks to a working man's clothes. And so the proverb is about a family who starts off working class, and then the family creates a lot of success. One generation of the family creates a lot of success by business success or investing or whatever. By the end of the 3rd generation, 2 things have happened. One, the money is all gone. And the second thing is the family's relationships are laid to waste because the money was a toxic influence on the family. And so that's something that happens. It happens in all cultures. It has nothing to do with the state taxes or tax rates, any of that stuff. Poor planning. It's about, there was a study done on it, a famous study, and they found out that when they asked these families who failed, affluent families who failed, what caused your family to fail and lose all your money? And they said, and that 60% of the survey respondents said it was due to a lack of communication and trust within the family. The kids are not getting along, they don't like each other, they don't agree on how to do things, they have different opinions, and then another 25% of the failures were caused by unprepared heirs. They had no idea what to do. A lot of parents don't even want to tell their kids how much money they have because they're afraid they're going to end up becoming like, the old axiom, waiters. They ask the wealthy kid, what do you do for a living? I'm a waiter. Oh, you're a waiter? Yeah, I'm waiting for my inheritance, And everybody's biggest fear is that their kids are going to be that, right? They're just going to sit around. They're not going to have productive lives, and they're going to get this money. But if that's your biggest fear, if you leave wealth to that child, even though that child might be 60 years old, and they're not prepared, the risk is overwhelming. They're going to blow themselves up. And they don't have any experience. They don't know how to manage it. People are going to come to them and hoodwink them, or they're going to have people giving it away. Some kids get money and they feel guilty inheriting it. And so then they end up doing self-destructive things with the money. So there are things you can do to prepare your kids for the inevitable outcome that you're going to inherit wealth from me. But you have to have meetings with them. I have a book out there. Some of you are holding it, have it, and if they ran out, if you're interested in how to deal with it, I've got the book out there, and you can come and see me afterwards, and I'll send you one. Okay, but it is a big thing. Don't assume that you just leave your money to your kids and it's all going to be butterflies and and hula hoops and unicorns. Yeah, it's not going to be. The odds are overwhelming that it's not going to be that.
So what, do you do you have everyone, you have the clan come into your office, or how do you actually even go about that?
Well, at the very least, we'll sit down with a client, we'll go to their house, or we'll go to some place where the family is. Sometimes they rent hotel rooms. It can be in the parents' house or cabin or whatever. We've done it on cruise ships even. And you get all the kids there, and you have the parents explain the will. What's going to happen? Well, here's what I want to happen. And most importantly, who's getting mom's hutch or the brooch or whatever, the painting, because they'll fight over that like you wouldn't believe. And you tell them all at once. We actually video record that meeting so that everybody, they can go back and say, here, see, mom said this or dad said this, and there's no
That is
no
so
confusion.
smart.
It's really worth its weight in gold. People hate doing it because they don't want to have those hard conversations with their kids, but I'm telling you, it's worth its weight in gold. I'll give you one personal experience.
Oh, yeah, I'd like-
My father died in 2012, and he didn't have a big estate. But he left a little small trust worth about $7,000 to my sister because my sister was on disability, but he didn't tell my brother. So my father is now in a coma. He's in his living room. We're all there doing the vigil thing, waiting for him to pass. And my sister just casually says to my brother, Pat, Dad gave me this $7,000 trust at the credit union. I don't feel good about taking it. I'm just going to split it with you. My brother went ballistic because he didn't know about it, and so then he starts making these demands of me. I'm the trustee. I want to have all these reports. I want to see the last 4 years of Dad's bank statements and all of his credit card statements. And he didn't speak to my sister for 5 years after that, and she was offering to give him half. But he just felt, like disenfranchised, and maybe my father loved her more than him. People equate money with love. And so just that one little thing where my father didn't, if he just told my brother in person what would have happened, it would have saved that whole problem. So communication.
Got it.
Yeah.
I thought it was location. I don't know. Okay, wow. Does anyone have anything to add about transference of wealth to heirs before we go on? Anyone? No? Last chance? No? Mark, why are you looking at me like that?
We've beaten it to death already, I think.
I don't think it's addressing the main topic.
Well, bring it on. What do you want to add?
Well, again, what I've seen is that when the kids come in to pick up the pieces, then they're negotiating with each other about, okay, who wants the house, who wants this, and a lot of that could be done ahead of time and make it much easier to do the transition, because there's an order of things. Timing is important. The order of things is important when you're doing estate planning, and getting everybody involved. I think I've read Richard's book 1.5 times. I'm on my second read currently, but so I promote that as a great read. Just don't get hung up on the exercises, but it has some really good ideas, which I've incorporated in my practice as well. But
Nice.
I mean, we're afraid. I mean, I have a client that inherited a bunch of wealth, and he's afraid to tell his wife. I mean, at some point she's going to find out.
That is so true.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I believe in early communication, early involvement. It just makes things go better. I mean, I have clients that bring their kids to the tax meetings, and I've seen it go from 5 years before they died, and then they pick up the pieces afterward, and they know who I am, they know what I'm like, they trust me. Things just go better when there's a discourse.
That is really, really good. Thank you. Thank you. Well, now we're going to talk about my favorite subject, real estate. And we're going to talk about real estate transfer. And Mark, as long as we've got you,
Sure. My mic's still on.
let's talk about that and possible capital gains, tax ramifications when selling after many years, alternative options to defer, and mistakes that could be made and maybe avoided.
Sure. There's a lot, and I don't know that we even have time to get very deep on any of them. But timing, I mentioned just now. Timing is important when you're dealing with real estate because there could be capital gains issues. Probably the worst thing to do is to sell the home when someone's terminally ill. You're avoiding what's called a stepped-up basis. If the house can go into the estate, it gets revalued to current market value, and there's no capital gains if it's then sold. And that could be true whether it's a spouse's likely to pass on, the survivor gets that stepped-up basis, so then they can sell the house after that event. And that can be a huge number, especially with real estate in California if you've lived in your home a long time. There's a lot of let me reverse this. There's not one size fits all. Everybody has their own profile. What I have seen is that sometimes there's maybe a vacation home that somebody wants to pass on. There's instruments like an installment sale where you can spread the capital gains over a number of years versus taking it all at once. That can sometimes avoid tax completely if you do it right, or at least it reduces their income. I think that there's mistakes made when downsizing. I get the question every once in a while, I want to move to a cheaper state to live in. When I've done studies, some states are more expensive to live in. You wouldn't necessarily realize that, but some states have a flat tax. California has a progressive tax. What that means is that maybe on the first $50,000 of income, you don't pay any tax. There's also Social Security that's taxed in other states, but not California. But I don't want to get off course on the real estate. So there's more affordable housing within the Bay Area than where some of us live. And so you can stay local, reduce maybe your housing costs if you do it right. But everybody has to be evaluated for their situation. And at least from a tax perspective, that's an important step before you do anything spontaneous,
Yeah.
Which I've seen too often, actually.
We were talking about the 1031 exchange option, which you cannot use on your primary residence. It's the long game, right? But I actually know of more than a couple people that did this. It was long-term planning where they had their primary, then they rented it out. Of course, they had to go find another place to live. So now it's a rental, it's an investment property. Then they 1031 exchanged it into another investment property, and that could be into 1 or 5 different things. It could be into raw land. There's like for like. I mean, we're not going to get too involved in that. And then at some point,
Yeah.
right?
There's one other scenario that, let's say somebody wants the family house. There are provisions that you can sell your house to a family member. They can retain your property tax assessment if you do it right. And a lot of people overlook that. So before you go sell your house, find out if any of your children want it. Because once that property tax is reassessed, you can't get it back. I've unfortunately seen things go south on a sale where the person ended up with the house back, but now it's been reassessed. And,
That's too bad.
that can be devastating.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm going to ask Richard now. We're going to change it a little bit and talk about, and we did do a Zoom on Prop 19 a couple years ago. It's on the website if you want to kind of revisit that. But we want to talk a little bit about tax limitations, Prop 19, I think we said 13, and whatever other propositions we need to be considering or have impacted,
Yeah.
right, our real estate.
Prop 19 sort of overrode all the other ones, Prop 58 and some of the other 193, I think. And so after Prop 19 was passed in 2020, and it basically changed the taxation of assets of a house, real property, when you transfer them to the next generation. So if you are a parent and you want to transfer your principal residence to a child, if they're going to live in the child, either during lifetime or after death, if they're going to live in the house themselves as their primary residence, they get to take your property tax basis, and then they can have another $1 million of value on top of that, and they will keep your property tax basis. The extra $1 million will not have an increase of tax. Anything above that, they will pay a tax. So let's just say your property tax basis is $100,000. You bought the house, I don't know, years ago, 1960 or something. Now it's maybe $200,000, but the house is worth $2 million. So you would have your $200,000 tax basis to pass on, plus $1 million to your child or children. So that's $1.2 million that they would not have any increase. But anything above that, so the other $800,000, they would get an increase now if they live in the house. If they don't live in the house, there's no forgiveness at all. There's no exemption. They have to pay. The house gets a full step up in property tax basis. For grandparents, you can leave money or a house to your grandchildren, but it has to be after death to be able to qualify for that same exemption. It can't be during a lifetime.
I think when we all voted that in, we were focused more on, it'll be good for the people that lost their homes in the fire, right?
Yeah.
Or it'll be good to transfer our tax basis to
Right.
anywhere in the state, which
Right.
is one of the things that changed. But I think people weren't paying attention to that second half of that proposition
Yeah, the
that we all
gotcha.
voted for, right?
Yeah.
The
I
devil's
think
always in
there have been
the
some efforts to
details.
overturn that, but I don't know where they are right now.
It's not on the ballot for next week.
Not on the ballot,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
One thing that was a plus is that it allows you to move more than once. It used to be a one-time provision. Now it's up to 3 times. So if you
I
end
know
up
that. That's good.
if you end up moving within California and decide that it wasn't the right move, you can move 2 more times
Within California.
within California. And that's one of the downsides to going to other states. Other states have higher property taxes than you're probably used to, and you might find that they have higher income taxes as well. So
Got it.
you got to be careful.
Yeah, I had a client who was hell-bent to get out of California and all the taxes that we have here and everything, and she moved to Texas and bought real estate. And she wishes she was paying her 6% in California taxes because she didn't realize that her house is going to get reassessed every January.
Special.
And the rate on some of those is like 2%.
Yeah.
It's outrageous.
Sheesh, see?
So figure out which tax you got to be concerned about. There's lots of different taxes out there, and all the states are different.
You got to look at the overall taxation, right? Not just one or the other. So Nancy, when a home is sold and net proceeds from the sale are placed into a bank account, is there anything we should be concerned about or thinking about or plan for? Oop.
Turn on my Mac. Today, often your house is sold and money actually gets wired into your bank account instead of back in the day, you'd probably get a nice big check in the mail. But when you deposit that check in the bank, a couple things to think about. First is that the bank is insured, or that money's insured up to $250,000. So there may be some other options if the check is larger than that. But the one thing to be cautious of when you are at the bank, there's always a few individuals at the bank that are there to help you with some investments. So oftentimes when the account value is over $100,000, it's likely that you'll receive a phone call from one of these individuals at the bank. And the misconception is that they are an employee of the bank, and they are not. Their goal is to invest that money for you. They don't look at the whole picture of what your plans are for that money. It is to make a sale. So oftentimes this happens to individuals, and sometimes it's too late to undo things without a cost to the person. Sometimes you can unwind some of those investment decisions. So it's important, really to talk to your advisor at that point in time so that you don't get led down that road. Perfect example of my mom, who is now 94 years old, and she was around 90. So she sold some property. This is back in the Midwest. She'd gone to the same bank for the last, 75 years, knows everybody in the bank, and sure enough, she got that phone call. She asked me what to do. I told her she just needed to sit on those funds for a while until she knew until she had a plan in her mind of what she wanted to do with those funds. But she couldn't stand sitting there seeing it not receiving any interest. So she made an investment. I had no idea of it until she called me and said, I met with, so-and-so from the bank. I've known her for years. And she put me in this investment. And I said, well, what was it? She goes, I have no idea. So it can happen. And here I'm her daughter. I'm in the financial services, and she still didn't listen to me. So But it does happen. And the other thing that sometimes happens as well is people will put their children on an account with them. And now they become a joint owner in that account. It's a liability to you. If anything were to happen to that child and there was a lawsuit and, and assets get, targeted in those situations, you just became part of that lawsuit. So it's really important that you have your accounts properly titled.
Did you hear that? That's a biggie. How do we make that work, though, if we need to be helping our parents pay bills and such? Is there a way around that, Nancy?
You can be a signer on the account.
Just a signer.
Without being a joint owner.
Mary, is that what you're going to say? Okay, cool.
Well, I just wanted to add, the same mistake is made on people's house titles. They put their kids on the house, and technically they just gave half the house to their child, and it ruins all of their estate plans, unless there's only one child. And even if there is, it's not the right way to do it. It's only going to get a half stepped up in basis. There's all kinds of things that happen that you don't want to have happen. So if you ever hear of that idea, just say, no, I know better.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah. And I'm gonna kind of skip down because I really want to make sure we have time for questions, because I bet you guys have some pretty good questions today. But Mary, you and I were talking about trusts, and we've been talking about the importance of having a trust for over 5 years in these seminars. And we really dug deep. I don't know how many people were here for the June going from we to me, losing a spouse, losing a partner. I mean, we really dug deep that month about that. Always good to review. But Mary, just as a reminder, what should we know and why should we choose to have a trust? And of course, this has to do with probate.
Yeah, so if you've been attending Dayna's seminars, then you know that if you have a family trust, it is revocable, but it will bypass a full-on probate. And the probate limit here in California is $185,000 of gross assets. So I emphasize gross because a lot of people say, well, my house is worth $1 million, but I have a $900,000 mortgage on it. It's going to go off the gross value of your home. So anybody who owns a home in the state of California probably needs to have a family trust. The other thing is, and Mark alluded to it, when you have a trust, you get a full step up in basis upon this first spouse's death. If it's held joint tenants, you only get a step up on half of it for the deceased spouse. The surviving spouse, the cost basis remains the same. So you don't get as much tax, capital gain tax benefit from that when you're holding it as a joint tenant. I think, a lot of people think a probate is an easy thing, but they get very expensive, and those are not costs that the attorneys are telling you. They're the costs that the state is dictating to the attorneys. So you can't blame the attorneys for how expensive a probate is because they're only charging you what the state's told them to charge you. Right. So, my own husband was very adverse to getting trust. He didn't want to spend the money, until he found out how much a probate would cost should both of us die on an airplane, and we travel a lot together. And that was what made him, say, I guess we should go and spend $3,000-4,000 to get a trust done. There are attorneys out there, and circumstances are different for everybody, and trust can be a lot more expensive than that, but a basic trust package that includes a trust, a will for both of you. It should include that durable power of attorney, DPOA is the acronym. That just means that somebody can act on your behalf should you not be capable of talking for yourself. And then your health care directive, which is for health purposes to make health and medical decisions for you should you not be able to. It's completely worth the money. And by the way, if by chance any of you still have kids that are young adults, or you have grandchildren that are turning 18, get a health directive for them. Because when your kids go away to school and they're out of state and they get hurt, and all of a sudden you get a phone call from a random roommate that says, hey, Susie's in the hospital, if you call the hospital's not going to talk to you unless you have a healthcare directive for that child. It's super important to make sure 18-year-olds are adults. But I think the biggest thing here from my perspective is just, people don't realize how low the threshold is for probate in the state of California, so it is worth every penny if you don't have a living trust to talk to somebody who can get you a living trust, and an estate attorney can do that.
Did you want to add something, Richard?
I just want to add 3 more benefits to the ones that Mary talked about for having a trust. First is if most of us are going to become incapacitated at some point before we die, and it does give somebody else, a successor trustee, control over your assets. They can sell your house, they can manage your affairs, everything else. It's also easy to transfer. If you have a trust, the transfer to the next generation is so much easier. Basically, you get a death certificate and you're done. In most cases. And then the ability to create spendthrift trusts in your trust. Like, for example, if you have a kid that's a gambler or something, or they're on drugs, you don't want their creditors to be able to get at the money, you can set up a spendthrift trust to make sure that those creditors can't get the money. Also for minors, if you have minors, you can set up a trust for them. Or special needs trust, if you have a child that's disabled or has some kind of a infirmity, you can set that up as well. So trusts are just really, really phenomenal tools.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm going to touch on 2 more things, and we've got so much to cover today. 2 more things, and I'm going to ask kind of for the high-level answer, but Mary, we wanted to talk about, and maybe we'll make this a topic for next year. Would anyone be interested in making a full topic on fiduciaries? Yes. Would that be, because I know we've done that in the past, so that might be something of interest. Okay, so maybe we'll save that for later, but like a couple sentences of why we might consider hiring a professional fiduciary?
Yeah, a lot of heirs are not prepared to settle an estate. Nobody knows how difficult it is to settle an estate unless you know what to do, and most of us don't know what to do. Now, there are people out there that are fully capable of settling an estate, but if your children don't live locally, or they don't have the time, because they are very time, or they're just not responsible enough. Hiring a professional fiduciary or trustee can be a really great solution. And I mean, all of us probably know a handful of them that are in this area. I'm working with a professional trustee right now on 3 different estates. And for that child that says, I'm owed, the professional fiduciary, or the professional trustee / fiduciary can just go, dude, sit down, wait your turn. Whereas Sister Susie may be intimidated.
Yeah, there's
by
no emotional
brother.
connection.
You've got all these dynamics around,
Yeah.
and so they can be very positive.
Nice, thank you. And Nancy, we're going to wrap it up with the last question for you, which is government benefits, VA, medical, anything we should know about that, protecting our assets through that?
I'll simplify it a little bit because we are
Veterans Administration, I'm so sorry.
in the VA.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's great. Yes, for the VA, the government benefits VA pension with the aid and attendance add-on, which is also called the enhanced pension. Do we have any veterans in the room today? Okay, and if you're not a veteran, you may also very well need a veteran, but thank you for your service. I'm married to a Vietnam veteran, so I'm pretty well, becoming very well adversed in just understanding how the system works, and it is challenging. So with the guidelines for the aid and attendance, I'll just briefly run through it. You have to serve as on active duty for 90 consecutive days. Of 1 day you're in active war. Wartime periods for World War II through the Gulf War conflicts. The maximum benefit to help with home care or your health care needs is $2,050 for a veteran. But it also works also for a spouse of a veteran. If the veteran has passed away and the widow has not remarried, the benefit also extends to her. Benefit can be for the spouse and their wife. So it's anywhere from $2,000 a month to $3,200. It is a very long process. There are income limits to qualify for the pension. There's also net worth limits. The net worth currently is about $138,000, which is your total net worth. But there are ways around this number, and that's where you absolutely need the help of a VA-accredited attorney, because there are ways to reduce that number to help you to qualify for the benefit. Same applies for the income. The income requirements are also quite low. You take in all sources of income from yourself, your spouse, could be rental income, whatever it happens to be. But they also have what is called on-reimbursed medical expenses. And that could be, a family member might be helping with the care. So if you're with the proper planning, as in a caregiver agreement, and you actually show that you're paying your son, your daughter, niece, family, whoever, that can be reduced from this income limit and actually help you to qualify. So if you take anything away from this today, because everybody knows a veteran, is don't try to navigate that system by yourself. It is quite a process. And don't just throw your hands up in the air and say, I give up, I'm not going to go down this road. There is a 3-year look back, but there's even ways around the 3-year look back for repositioning assets to actually help you to qualify those net worth requirements. So it's really important if you're up against that and you do need some extra income to pay for care, and this is tax-free income, that it's really important to reach out to a VA-accredited attorney. And, with the help of the attorney and the help of your advisor, a plan can be put in place, and hopefully, you're able to qualify for that benefit.
Thank you very much. All right, we've got time for just a few questions, then we'll do the raffle and get you on your way. Who has a question today?
Do you have the RMD formula? Could we have that, please?
You take the balance of your IRAs, or IRA, and you have to divide it by the life expectancy factor, which is on the IRS. You just have to get an IRS life expectancy table, and it's simply the 1231 balance divided by the life expectancy factor. And there are some nuances to it. If you have plan assets, like you still have a 401k or a 403b, you have to take the RMDs out of those accounts. If you have multiple IRAs, like a SEP IRA or a contributory IRA, you can combine all of those and add all those accounts up in their 1231 balance. But if you do still have plan assets, like a 403b or a 401k, those RMDs have to come out of those accounts.
Also, if you have an inherited IRA, there's a whole set of that. You don't try this at home by yourself. Basically, the rules are really complicated. They haven't, as Mary was talking about, there's a new mortality table this year that took effect, and so you have to go back. It's complicated, but you have to go back to when the person died and you inherited the money. Look and see how old you were then, what the factor was then, and then move forward to today to figure out how much you have to take.
Hey, Marianne.
Very complicated.
Marianne, I know some really good financial advisors.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Me.
Sue.
Yes, I was wondering for the VA qualified for the medical help, is your amount of considered, is it your yearly income, or is it also all your assets that are considered in figuring out what the limit is that you have to be under in order to qualify? That makes sense.
They look at your income limits. They also look at your net worth.
Net worth.
It is a calculation, and it's a complicated one.
Nancy and I are working with a couple right now, and he served in the U.S. Navy for 41 years, both in active and reserve duties, and he has not been taking any benefits. And we're trying to help them get moved to a care community because they are desperately in need of that. But I think between all the experts we've got on the team, we'll help them out. Bill.
Just a couple quick questions. The first one might be kind of a minor detail, but on a revocable living trust, the spouse passes away, you are both listed as trustees. Is it necessary to go in and have her removed from the trust? And secondly, Richard, what do you think of managed portfolios?
Yeah, as for the trust, normally, now, trusts can be written however you need them to be written, but, the very traditional way is that the married couple become co-trustees, and then when the first spouse dies, the survivor becomes the sole trustee. If the surviving spouse is not capable of acting as trustee, there's normally successor trustees that are named in the documents, and at that point, if the person is capable, they can resign as trustee, and the next in line that you've named can accept the position of trustee. Now, if they don't want to accept it, you go down to the person after that. If the person is not competent and they can't even resign, then you're probably should be in your trust documents how this would work, but you're probably going to need a doctor to sign off that the person is not capable of acting, and then have that change made that way if they're not competent enough to resign on their own.
But you can remain as the trustee and just leave her name on there?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah. If the surviving spouse is competent enough and wants to stay as a sole trustee, there's probably maybe I shouldn't say probably, maybe it just depends on how the trust is written, the ability to bring one of the successor trustees to be a co-trustee with the surviving spouse too, if that makes sense.
We have time for 2 more questions. Madame, you've been patiently waiting. For Richard. Oh, I'm so sorry.
About managed
Uh-oh, okay,
assets.
okay.
Real quick,
Let her rip.
that's like asking me what I think about wives. It all depends on who's managing them, what their management strategy is, how much they're charging you. There's a lot to answer. Well done ones are good. They can be beneficial.
I've noticed that some people have their bank accounts, their checking and their savings accounts in a trust. Is that something that we should do? Or I went to the bank and they said, do not put our checking account in the trust because our daughter is on the checking account. And today I heard something interesting about that. But, I didn't know which way to go on this.
Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, so in essence, when you put your daughter on the account, she became an owner of the account, and if you had $100 in the account, $50, you gave her $50. So it goes back to my very profound answer earlier, is it depends. It depends on how much money you're holding in your savings accounts and checking account. Remember, probate, $185,000 this year. It'll go up a little bit next year for cost of living. But if you're somebody like that one client of mine who says, I got to have $1 million in the bank to sleep at night, you better believe her bank accounts are all in the name of her trust. Okay?
Perfect. And Pamela, come on up. Pamela has the raffle drawing for today, the raffle prize, but she also has a question, so I'm going to let her be the very last question of the day.
I have a quick question for those of us who are still working and contributing to a 401k. Can we convert the 401k to a Roth IRA?
You can't convert them unless it's in your plan documents. So that's the thing about a plan. It has to have language that allows that to happen. Otherwise, you have to stop contributing to the plan before you can convert.
You can have both, though?
Absolutely.
Okay, make sure we've got your evaluation. If you want us to connect with you, I need a name or a phone number, and we've got to get out of here. I'm so sorry. But write it on your eval. We'll get an answer for you. Did you pull one?
Yeah.
What is the number, Mark?
I think they're all 466, and then it's 118.
118. Who's got the lucky ticket? Ending in 118. Somebody go home with the ticket?
Possibly.
Going. All right, here.
And this one is 466143.
14. Okay. Pamela, thank you. What did you bring today?
You have a nice treat, some Prosecco and macaroons for tonight, and a gift card for Starbucks tomorrow.
Wow. Wait, Prosecco?
Very nice. Yes, and macaroons, plus a gift card for Starbucks for tomorrow.
When do you want me over? Did we get some great information today? Can we give these guys a round of applause? Amazing. Really, these are a lot of smart people here. So we'll get you all their contact information. If you have further questions, write it on your email. We'll get the answers that you need. And we thank you so much for coming. And we will see you in December on the 7th for What's It Worth? Remember, we're going to need you to send us a picture and a short description of the item you're going to bring. Thank you. Have a great day. Great job. Great job.
Bigger number, probably. Oh, they're out of cards? They're out there on the desk. Yeah, so I looked them all out. But, if you want to keep your...